welcome back to episode 20 of Interview with Scientists series as we enter quarter 3 of 2021. Our guest for today is Jason Zackowski, Bunsen and Burner. Jason is an award-winning high school teacher from Alberta, Canada. He is a proud dog dad of Bunsen and Beaker, two of the biggest science communicators on Twitter. Through compassion, empathy, kindness, and cuteness, the account tweets from the perspective of Bunsen, a Bernese mountain dog, and Beaker, a golden retriever, educating in a very approachable manner. Today we will speak with them and the unique scicomm science communication style about Bunsen and Beaker and how to make science more fun and approachable. Welcome, gang, and thank you for joining us today.
No problem. The dogs probably aren't going to be on camera, though. They're a little too short.
No problem. So let's
So
start.
Bunsen is a monster. Bunsen's pretty big, so if you want, at the end, we get a shot
Sure.
of him. So.
So let's start with your science background. Can you tell us more about what sparked your interest in science?
Right, okay, man, that's like the question I asked the guests first on my podcast. That's funny to actually have to think about it myself. Oh, I was a nerd growing up. I loved science. I was a big space nut. Like when I was younger, I loved space. And then I got into more chemistry in high school. And then I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry.
Okay.
And as I was finishing up my degree, I enjoyed it. I did not I'm sure you've talked to guests who have masters and a PhD, and
Yes.
there's a lot of research and paper writing, and I didn't like that in university.
Yep.
I was like the person that they're like, okay, you're good at talking. You do the presentation. You talk guy, right? Like I was that in all of the different groups.
Yes.
And I was a swim instructor, and I worked with kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of made it was a leap of faith to go into education.
Okay.
Because I was I liked working with kids of all ages, and I thought I could teach them science. And then I have an education degree as well. And it was when I did my first practicum. So as a teacher, you have to go into the classroom and basically try to apply what you learned on a book to teach human beings, and none of it really works well, right?
Okay.
It's all experience.
Yes.
And it was a good fit. So that's where I am right now with my career. I'm a science teacher, a science educator, but I like science all along, but it was the presentation of science I was
Okay.
good at, and I enjoyed the most.
Yeah, that sounds really great. Teaching is a noble profession, I must say.
I love it. I'm very fortunate to have a job that I wake up every morning and I'm super excited to get to school.
Yes.
To do whatever, right? Even though the kids are half asleep because I teach high school kids. They're not as excited as me. I was like, "Okay, guys, we're going to talk about radioactive decay," and they're like, "Whoa."
Not again.
Yeah, they're like, "How does this apply to my life?" Well,
Yes.
It doesn't. But we're going to talk about it anyways.
So, what is science communication for you, and why is science communication important in today's world?
Yeah, so I wasn't a science communicator. It's really the dog's account that has turned into this huge science communication account. We're almost at 100,000 followers on
Yes.
Twitter, and what I found was that because it started as just a cute dog account, really, to be honest with you, just posting pictures of Bunsen when he was a puppy, because Bernese mountain dogs as a puppy look like little bears, and they're so cute.
Okay.
But then I was like, we named him after a piece of science equipment.
Yes.
And then I would occasionally, as a dog, tweet out a science fact or something, and it got a really positive response. And and then after that, it slowly morphed over about 6 months into a communication account that still tweeted out cute pictures of the dogs and was really caring and empathetic, but gave its own spin on science communication. And it's definitely found a niche, right?
Yes.
The world needs more science communication.
Mm-hmm.
And scientists now are learning more about how important that is.
Yes.
With, vaccine hesitancy and climate change denial.
Yeah.
I truly think that science is playing catch up to all of the science denial accounts and all of that on social media, right? And that's how important science communication is. It like combats that.
Okay.
And because we're playing catch up, we need all the different types of science communication.
So,
And I'm getting kind of long-winded, but I guess just to wrap up is that because it's a dog that's tweeting science,
yes,
it's a different spin on it.
yes,
And we don't get the same, like we do get blowback from anti-vax people and anti-climate change people, but I don't think it's the same vitriol that my colleagues who are climate scientists and are immunologists get. So it's kind of a sneaky way to get science to people.
yes. So the dogs make the science communication account unique. So how did you think of giving them a shot? Like, do they go to the labs and do experiments?
Yeah. So Bunsen, I don't know if you heard Bunsen. He was just having some water. They're dogs, right?
Yes.
So they're not people.
Of course.
And I try to give them. We try to give them unique personalities on Twitter.
Yes.
So Bunsen's more reserved, and Bunsen really likes bacon because that's true.
Yep.
And Beaker's the golden retriever, so she's like high energy.
Yes.
But Bunsen for sure he's very well trained. Beaker's still a puppy.
Yeah.
But they're not lab dogs, like they're not service dogs. So people think they come to school and they like somehow help out with, doing an experiment, and it's not safe for them, right?
Yes.
So it's a bit of a facade. They're like a Muppet. That's the best way to explain it, right?
Yes.
I'm Jim Henson, and Bunsen and Beaker are the Muppets, right? They're like Kermit the Frog. They're like, Bunsen and Beaker, the actual Muppets.
Yes.
So when you pull back the curtain, there's me, behind the scenes, giving them that personality.
Yes.
But if you don't pull back the curtain, it really feels like they're doing science and talking about science.
Yes.
And they do come to my school, and I do, I've trained them to wear the different lab equipment. I've trained them to, look cute and sit and pose for pictures.
Yes.
But if people sometimes wonder, like, do they grab science equipment and no, it's not safe for a dog to do that, right? They're not a human. I think people would wish that, but no.
If that happens, the dogs do science experiments, then that would be a revolution. Humans can sit back and enjoy.
We've lots of people want, like, they've tagged Netflix. They want the dogs to be a cartoon, right? Because if they're a cartoon, you can make believe with a cartoon, and that would make for a really hilarious cartoon, right? If they were animated.
Yes, that would be a good thing. Maybe this is a good way to educate young students, because kids are fond of dogs, most of them.
Yeah.
So maybe sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was just gonna say people love dogs, right?
Yes.
That's the catch. They see the cute dog picture and maybe they learn some science, right?
Yes. So
and that's the sneaky trick.
yes. So what are your future goals with Bunsen and Beaker account?
Well, one thing I can't really talk about because it's in development.
Yep.
But there's something that's kind of fun that's in development that may become a big thing or may not. But the main thing is to have their account grow and be a source of be part of the science communication team.
Yes.
Right? There's great science communicators on Twitter.
Yeah.
I really look up to, like, Timothy Caulfield. He's a great example, right?
Yes.
He's a great Canadian science communicator. Well, he's American, but he lives in Canada.
Yeah.
And he's he's great at debunking stuff.
Yes.
So we're just part of that team. And I think, like, having people who are straight up very serious, we need that, right? We need those serious science communicators. But I want Bunsen and Beaker to be like just a part of that team, like part of a pyramid.
Yes.
That when you get to the top, we've explained science to everybody in the world.
Yes.
It would be great if we get picked up and there's a cartoon or we get asked to write a children's book or something like that. I mean, those are all things that I'm hoping down the pipe happen. They haven't happened yet, but
hopefully this should happen, and I will encourage through our Twitter account and tag people who can do this, who can help you out. So, can you tell us more about the Bunsen and Beaker merchandise that you have?
Oh, right. So I run a podcast called the Science Podcast.
Yes.
And through their account, like it's a part-time job for me, right? Their account is so big
Yeah.
that I have a very, very busy day job, right? Like a
Yes.
classroom teacher's job is very busy.
Yes.
And the merchandise is kind of we dipped our toes in that like a couple years ago, and it's just a way to monetize and get a little bit of income from all of the work we put into the account.
Yes.
Right? So we rarely push the merchandise. Like I maybe talk about it every couple weeks or every 3 weeks. But there's adorable T-shirts,
Yes.
and we had. It's hard to explain to people who don't know Bunsen and Beaker. My favorite thing that came out of the merchandise is Beaker, the golden retriever, is in a fake band called
Yes.
Vultures of Parliament. And it's a rock band based on like 80s music. And it was so popular, this weird storyline, that we had our cartoonist drop a cartoon of the Beaker singing. And it's like, so the band consists of Beaker, a cat, a snake, and a llama. It's really weird, right?
Okay.
But it was so popular, I had a company develop actual music
Yeah.
that this band that supposedly sings. And anyways, that was really fun. And then like pinned on our Twitter account is the main song from that,
Yeah.
which is COVID-19 vaccine. So
Okay.
they're science related songs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's,
And it's actually on iTunes. Like if you search Vultures of Parliament,
Okay.
their music is on iTunes.
okay. That sounds interesting. I'll listen to this today.
Yeah.
So
We're gonna get a couple more songs made pretty quick here. So I think there's 4 right now.
okay. So we'll have a playlist soon.
Yeah, and we developed a Bunsen stuffy, so it's a little stuffed animal with a lab coat, but it's sold out now.
Okay.
And we are just we've just gave the okay for the Beaker stuffy. So
Okay.
people are it's adorable. It looks like her, and it comes with pink safety glasses
Yes.
and a lab coat because she's a girl.
Okay. So you just mentioned about science podcast.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about it, and who are your target audience with the science podcast?
Right. So with Twitter, you're limited in characters. I think anybody that's on Twitter knows that. Like
Yeah.
you type stuff up and then it goes red, and you're like, well, that's all I'm going to be able to get across. So the Science Podcast was a way to get more science across than Twitter can allow. Right. And it's a weekly show. So we're on like season 3 now.
Okay.
And every week I do a new episode, and it talks a little bit. It opens with something timely about science, and then a little bit of pet science. So something that's happening with dogs, cats, birds, or anything, all of our pets. And then I have a scientist interview, kind of like what we're doing right now. And because of Bunsen and Beaker's account, people have been, like other scientists have been really generous with their time because they love the account. And it's been pretty easy to get guests to come on, and I chat with them about their science, but also about the pets they've had in their life.
Okay.
So that's what the Science Podcast is. The audience is it's a wholesome family show. So we have lots of listeners who who listen with their kids while they're driving, which I think is so cool. But we also have retired folks that listen to it.
Interesting.
Beaker's talking.
So I see every Tuesday you host a Twitter space.
Yeah.
So how is it different from the science podcast, and what are your goals with the Twitter space? I heard a lot of different topics about dogs, dog collars once. So
Yeah. So the Twitter space is something I started because it's easier for people to tune into that than possibly the podcast. So I'm getting people that don't listen to the podcast, they listen to that Twitter space, right?
Okay.
And what's really cool about Twitter Spaces is that people can interact with me as a speaker, because I'm just a normal guy, right? Like people think Bunsen and Beaker are these like it's a super famous account, it's really big.
Yep.
And when they talk to me like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm talking to you or whatever, I'm like, I'm just a teacher. Like, I'm not a famous person. I'm just like, go ahead, ask your question. So people have really liked that back and forth.
Yep.
And so some weeks the topic is dog centric, and people chime in with what they do with their dogs. But I've been trying to get, for the first half of the space, it's an hour long, a scientist to come talk about their area of science.
Okay.
So last week, or one of the Twitter spaces, we had Sophia Gad-Nassar, who studies dark matter, and she talked about dark matter for a half an hour, and then we had chats about dogs after that.
Okay.
We're going to have in the future Dr. Amanda Tokash. She was on the podcast. She's a mosquito researcher, so she's going to talk about mosquitoes. So, and then they can ask those scientists questions. So the podcast is like, here's the information, right? You can't interact with the people, but the spaces is really cool because there's that back and forth. You can actually ask questions. I love that.
Yes.
It's like a classroom.
Yes. So it's similar to Clubhouse.
It is like Clubhouse. I didn't know Clubhouse existed, and then they're like, "Hey, you should try this on Clubhouse." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, there's only one of me. I only have so much time in the day."
Yes. So, when teaching science to students, what's one thing that we should be aware so that they don't lose their interest in science? One critical thing.
Right. So so this is more my wheelhouse than like research science, right?
Yes.
Teachers need to be, all of the educational pedagogy, like the stuff that researchers in education have found, is it doesn't matter how you present the material as long as you are engaging.
Yes.
Right. If you're up there as a teacher and you are comfortable to rap and sing about science, that's one way you could present it. Or maybe you're presenting with Google Slides or a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter as long as you are a dynamic and engaging person. And that the main thing is you have to be passionate about what you're teaching. And that comes across to the kids.
Yes.
It absolutely comes across to the kids. If you are passionate about what you're talking about, that is the most critical thing. And then you have to make those connections with kids.
Yes.
So some teachers, there's education has kind of come cyclical. We should like only do group work or never do stand and present. Well, it just comes down to how passionate and how engaging you are as a person. And that's the main thing with teaching, is you have to give 100% of yourself every lesson. You can't just dial it in. The kids, especially with high school kids.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because kids can lose their interest very fast if it's not engaging or if they don't like the content.
Yeah.
So, do you think we should?
Like high school kids. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, please go ahead. I think there is a lag.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like high school. Like high school kids are young adults, and in 8:30 classes early. Like, they're tired.
Yes.
They don't care what you're going to be teaching. Usually, you have to make them care. You have to make it interesting.
Yes. Oh.
So.
Okay.
Oh, you're back.
Okay.
There you
Sorry,
go.
my internet connection just got unstable.
Yeah, it's all good.
So, do you think we should, while studying in class, we should accompany that with practical experience rather than just bookish knowledge, like basic science experiments?
Sorry to cut you off. I absolutely, So even though I was maybe a little bit, like, it just depends on the presenter, I am a firm believer that that students need to have hands-on experiences in science.
Yes.
As much as possible. I am very fortunate to teach at a high school that has amazing facilities for hands-on knowledge. We have lab spaces. We've accumulated like geological samples, for example, right? Like, we've got fossils in different types of rocks, just for example. But other schools, they don't have that. It depends on the school. It depends on where you're teaching.
Yes.
And one thing that I've been doing pre-COVID is I've been given leave from my school to go to other schools that don't have the same facilities and put on a science show.
Okay.
Because they don't necessarily have access to the chemicals that I have, or maybe the teachers are unfamiliar, or they think what I do is crazy. But that's how you can also get kids excited in science. You may not have the facilities, but you can have somebody come to you that has the stuff to explain the hands-on things to your kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's very
Yeah, I
important.
think it's really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what do you
You can talk about a titration all day long. You can talk about a titration all day long, but until you add a little bit too much and you go over the endpoint and it just turns like with phenolphthalein, it turns like bright pink and the kids are like, no, until they have that experience. They don't know what you're
they
talking
don't.
about.
Yes.
So
Yes. No, I firmly believe like practical experience is really important for kids because that
yeah.
sparks their interest in science or any other subject. And as a matter of fact, as you said,
Yeah.
collecting. Sorry, go ahead again.
No, I agree. I agree. Go ahead. Yeah.
So, what can we as teachers, scientists do to make science more engaging?
A lot of scientists are super passionate. Dogs are just fighting.
That's okay.
Knock it off. A lot of scientists they're passionate about what they study, right? Like I've talked to people with PhDs and they've devoted their whole life to one thing. and just a second. Hey guys, okay, go. Sorry.
No problem.
They're just gonna fight right by my mic. It's Beaker all the time. Beaker is always bugging Bunsen. Anyways, like education needs to be properly funded. That's the main thing. Canada has an amazing public school system, and for every dollar that is put into public schools, you get $2, $3, $4, $5 back in the economy. And a lot of people in, some people in politics, they see education as a loss, right? They're like, why are we funding this? All it is they just suck up money, and that it couldn't be further from the truth. If you educate students and you educate them to be critical thinkers, and there's funding for that, and you have those hands-on experience, you have the funding to get science equipment, to get, to have cool technology, or to have guest speakers come talk to you.
Yes.
You get kids more engaged and they learn more and they go on to become innovators and inventors and they in a capitalistic system, they have small businesses. Like it's critically important. So one of the things is like scientists can be really passionate about what they do, but we need the general population to back us up. And we can just look like what's happening right now with COVID, right? Like how much damage to our economy has occurred because people didn't take COVID seriously, right? Like for every person that got sick, when they could have taken it a little bit more seriously, they didn't understand the science. They didn't believe the science. They could have protected themselves differently and maybe not got COVID, and that's a tax on our healthcare system. So there's money spent that that could have been spent differently.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I think public education needs to be funded at a very high level. It needs to be a priority for society.
Yes, that's the main takeaway message from this question. So what do you enjoy the most in your free hours apart from doing scicomm?
So I build nerdy costumes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm big into aside from that, like I like fitness, so I work out and I run and things like that. Like I lift weights. I was in martial arts for a while. I was in Kung Fu, but my main passion outside of teaching is cosplay. So it's like building, screen accurate costumes. And it's just a really fun creative outlet. I've got a couple 3D printers, and I've learned to make things out of foam.
Yes.
I've made I've made foam costumes for the dogs, and people seem to really like that. And they've been trained to wear it, right? Like I don't force them to wear it, but people are always concerned about that. Like, do the dogs like wearing that? I'm like, well, they do because they get rewarded, and it's not uncomfortable. But so that's what I do outside of my teaching and science communication.
Nice. Thank you very much for your time today and sharing your thoughts about science education. It was really important, and about your unique science communication style using Bunsen and Beaker. And I would encourage everyone to follow Bunsen and Burner on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Jason on the same platforms. Thank you again.
Right. I'm Zed Science. Yeah, and they're Bunsen Burner, and on Instagram I think it's Bunsen Burner BMD, or they're both Bunsen Burner BMD.
I will definitely share the link on my YouTube channel.